Oh yeah.
All right, folks. Welcome back to the greenhouse. We are back with a yet another tech series installment. I don't know what we're gonna call this. So joining me and John in the studio today is our friend Joe,
Hello.
fellow Twitch streamer. What's the account name? AfroJoe68 on Twitch, or is it
AfroJoeTTV on Twitch.
Hell yeah. We'll make sure to plug that in the show notes as well. While this may not have been like the immediate focus of the news, it was like making headways in like tech news and tech reporting, and is part of like an ongoing focus on the role of AI in the tech sphere, and is I don't know how to say this. This is like a major development in like the business space of AI, but also has like long-reaching implications for how AI can and will be implemented in the future. So we got Joe on to lend some technical and business expertise here because the drama unfolding at the OpenAI corporate board has been crazy. And I also want to just give a shout out to John as well for encouraging us to go down this thread. So how do we even open this up? Because when we were trying to like warm up before starting this, we were just going crazy trying to figure out like how do we open this shit up?
Yeah, I think
good point. I mean, should we go into like the history of OpenAI for a little bit for people who just never heard of the company?
Just run through, give a good crash course on where OpenAI came from. What is it exactly?
I maybe just as a base to that too. Let's like maybe just talk about OpenAI as a company and like just the AI discussion, because it's been AI was like a big fucking cornerstone of the online discourse earlier last year and even earlier this year, and it's kind of been pushed to the side. So let's catch everyone back up to the minute, right? So with OpenAI and the recent advent of AI technologies, what does this market look like? Who are the major players? What are the current impacts and possible societal impact of this? Is AI just another bubble within the already burgeoning tech bubble? Or is this a possible good that is at the mercy of narcissistic tech entrepreneurs and neoliberal capitalism run amok?
I have a spicy opinion about this. So
Go for it.
Oh, me first. Okay. Personally, I think that I love technology. I love the idea of human beings being able to create new tools, create new awesome ways to do work. I hate how it's being used. That's kind of my general opinion. I think that tools should be used to make our work easier, not to replace us or to make some, narcissistic tech overlord, like you just said, more profits and more money. As for the AI space, there are a couple companies that are like in the business, or they're kind of sharing a space with OpenAI. OpenAI does seem to have kind of like this big, not cornered the market because they're supposedly a nonprofit, kind of not. But ultimately, there are other companies in the space. Like Anthropic is a big one. I know that Elon Musk is, I think, recently just started like, what is it, XAI?
Yeah.
I know that in terms of competitors with ChatGPT specifically, Google has Bard, which is supposed to be trying to implement like AI within Bing, which no one uses because it's terrible.
Bard is awful.
Yeah, it's god awful.
There's also Hugging Face and Cohere when it comes to just massive data set learning in general. Those are some pretty big competitors as well.
Just a quick question too that might clarify things for people less familiar with the tech space, right? What's the advantage, or what's like the methodology behind like open source for technology, and especially how open source organizations may sometimes run as nonprofits? Could you shed some light on that?
Me or Joe?
John, I think you're more familiar with that topic than I am.
Because I love open source. Open source is essentially a paradigm where it's, instead of having, so like a perfect way to describe this is kind of looking at what things are open source and what things aren't, right? So Apple is like your peak closed source example, right? You don't get to know any of the code that Apple is running. The only people who get to work on Apple's code is Apple, right? When you look at open source paradigms, you see that it inspires collaboration. You can take any open source project, add to it how you want to, and if you have permission, you can push it back up to their repo so they can use your code, or you can host it on your own repo, and you now have their product, but except with your changes. So it inspires collaboration. In my opinion, it makes it harder for things for certain software or whatever to be predatory. So like, if, for example, if like the Linux current if someone decides to throw like ads, in the Linux operating system, because it's open source and because no one fucking likes ads, someone's going to have a fork or someone's going to have a version of the project that removes the ads immediately. So it's like open source, I think because of the amount of collaboration, ultimately builds a better product, and it's better for the end consumer, as opposed to a closed source company like Microsoft, who literally puts ads in their operating system, and like there's nothing the end user can do about it.
So to follow up on that real quick too. So I agree with the principle, right, that open source can democratize technology to an extent, right?
Right.
We also see that like some entities and organizations that produce open source products or software will take the nonprofit route when they incorporate, right? Like Mozilla Firefox is an example of that. McAfee allegedly has a nonprofit, although I don't know how that's going. And then, like you were saying earlier, OpenAI is even delving into this weird, like, nonprofit space, right? So, to what extent is that sincere, and to what extent do you think that's opportunistic?
Personally, I think that there's a direct correlation to the sincerity of the company, like creating good software. There's a correlation between that and how open their code is. I think it's a direct correlation. Because like the only way to really make a profit in like this like software space is with privatization, right? Like if you don't know how my code works and I'm like hiding my code from you, I'm obscuring my code, you're gonna have to pay me for it, right? So the more open the code is, the more they can be trusted, right? When it comes, so like a lot of companies do in fact, a lot of open source companies do in fact structure themselves as nonprofits, but there is a downside in that we live in a society, our economic structure doesn't necessarily incentivize nonprofits. It's harder to, nonprofits just don't make that much money compared to for-profit organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, you'll see, companies like OpenAI. OpenAI literally has open in the name because it was initially planned on creating like open source AI models, like open source LLMs and things like that. But because of the fact that they wanted to create essentially good products, and you need, good money to pay these researchers who are like, making new grounds on this new form of technology, this new theory, it's like you need a ton of like money for that, and sometimes just being a for-profit company just can't cut it.
Okay.
Yeah, to build on top of that a little bit more, what John was talking about, that's exactly what happened with OpenAI. So one of the biggest reasons that they publicly share about why they transferred from being a nonprofit to, as they classify it, as a capped for-profit company, which we can go into what that means later, is because the fact that they wanted to hire the top talent from Google, from Facebook, because at the time they were the leading members of AI researchers. And the problem was they had trouble getting the top members because while they could match their salaries, they couldn't match the stock compensation, which in Silicon Valley is how most researchers and most engineers make most of their money.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so moving to that, or actually, sorry, getting us back on track. So OpenAI as a company and a business, what's the over-under on their contributions to the AI space that's earning them their place in the spotlight?
So I can go into this one if you don't mind, John.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So, in more recent history, the two biggest things that I think most people are relatively familiar with would be ChatGPT,
Okay.
which came out essentially the end of last year. Um, and also another thing called Dolly, which is basically a AI model that will generate art or images based on whatever text description you give it.
Hmm.
The limitation is that it won't make human beings just do, or at least it won't fully make a human being. But it can basically make almost anything else you want. Those are like the two biggest things that they're most well known for, but they also have done other stuff as well. So just to give like a tiny little history of OpenAI, it's a company that's been around for about 8 years or so, give or take. And it was originally made as a collaboration between Sam Altman, the CEO, and the original co-founders, along with Amazon Web Services, Elon Musk, and a couple of other big tech companies at the time, including the CEO of LinkedIn,
Hmm.
all funding the company. And that's what really put them on the map. And it wasn't until 2017 or 2018 where they made their first quote unquote contribution to the AI. Basically, to try and prove that they could create a model that could do complex actions that we thought only a human could do. They built a bot that would basically play the world champion Dota 2 players in 1v1s and in team matches. And ended up basically dominating in 2017 and 2018 against both the top 10 players and the world champion team. And that was really the first thing that really put them on the map because of the amount of time they were able to do it, which was about 3 months, and the complexity of it. So I'll say those are the three biggest things that really put OpenAI on the map as a company. And now they got Microsoft investing, so now they have all the funding in the world they need.
Yeah, literally.
Gotcha.
I think another I'm not sure if this might be a chicken and the egg situation, but like because of the fact that maybe because of their prolonged success within the OpenAI space, they were also able to hire some of like the cream of the crop researchers, like
Hmm.
people that you would find in textbooks are like working at OpenAI.
Yeah.
Because like I said, this might be chicken and the egg because of their success, but like that's one of the reasons why they're also on the map as well. I think after they dropped that Dota bot, they created ChatGPT 2 or GPT 2, I think it was.
Yeah, they traded GPT about a year later.
Which was I believe that was their first LLM, right?
Yeah, it was the first publicly released LLM that was able to like speak like a human. That was like the big thing about it.
Yeah, and you know we now know I never actually used GPT 2, but we now know what GPT 3 and 4 look like and
Right.
how they've improved upon that. And there's tons of stuff we can talk about there. We can talk about the implications on copyright infringement, like how do you get the data to train these insanely huge LLMs. We can talk about the fact that
What does
security.
LLM stand for? Is that logical language model or?
Yeah, it's a large language model. So it's
Yeah.
essentially just a way of, it's like a bot. It's a bot that can mimic human speak and human behavior. ChatGPT, I keep saying ChatGPT. ChatGPT is actually like the chatting bot. When we say GPT, we're actually talking about the model. But GPT is very interesting because it's trained off of internet data. It's trained off of like data that you can find, quote unquote, publicly available data you can find online, but they just amassed a huge amount of it and trained it so that it can talk like a human. But there are some interesting implications. Like, for example, I think 3 days ago, some Google researchers found they were doing some fuzzy testing. They were just like trying to see if they could break ChatGPT, and they found that if you entered a prompt and you told it to like repeat a certain word, it would just start dumping its training data. It would start dumping data that it was used to train the bot, which is dangerous because it could be dumping personal information. It could be dumping real credit cards. It could be dumping the names of like real people and their addresses. And it would just do that in plain text, just dumping that in the chat. There's a lot of implications because we don't know. This is the part I think that's more closed off. We don't know where they're getting the data from. Their models are open source. You can get their models right now, but we don't. The part that's more closed is how they're getting the data, where it's coming from, etc.
Right, and that's something that came out, I want to say earlier this year, right? Where I don't know how scandalous this revelation is to people who are familiar with the tech, right? But there was a bit of a scandal about, massive amounts of data needing to be manually marked by like tech employees in India, which kind of dealt this blow to confidence. And this is kind of where I want to phrase this question properly, but to be very frank, the reason why I'm asking is because I was surrounded by a lot of dumb people whose only source of information is like pop culture and TikTok, right? So when they think AI, they're thinking like fucking ENIAC from Superman, like they're thinking like Brainiac from Superman. That's not how AI works. It's like,
no, that's not how it works.
Yeah, it's a literal program that's like predictive intelligence more than anything else. But people hear AI and they think, cool, I don't have to hire workers anymore.
Yeah, so to give like the minimum definition of what I would classify AI as, it's basically any program that can automate a process or mimic a process that a human would do.
Which is what apps already do to an extent, right?
Yeah. So by strict definition, AIs have existed for a while. It's just that we're now getting to the place where self-learning AIs are becoming feasible. And they even existed back in the 90s. It just wasn't nearly to the extent that they are now because we just didn't have the technology to properly train them. But the algorithms and the concept behind them have been around for, I believe, since the 80s, actually. So it's not a new idea. It's just that we have the technology now to actually implement this.
Yeah, exactly. It's because we have like a mass. It's because they're self-learning, right? Like you can teach it things within the training process, and then also when it's actually running, you can still have it. You can still explain it to it things, and it'll remember, and it will like it's self-learning ultimately. That's not exactly what that means. So I'm trying to like dumb everything down.
Yeah.
But
we got really good at making sand think.
Right.
Basically,
we put lightning in rock, and now rock can think, pretty much, right?
Oh boy.
another really important part, and why we're able to take such huge steps is because of the internet, because of the fact that we have just a massive amount of data that we can just train anything on. I think that OpenAI, I forgot the number. I think OpenAI ended up spending like, what was it, like 78 million or something close to like $100 million 1 year. That was just on infrastructure alone, just on buying servers to put a bunch of data on so it can train. And that was never really possible. At any other point in technological history.
Yeah, I forgot the exact number too, but just to give you guys some examples of like how much it takes even for the Dodo bot, for example. If I remember the exact numbers correctly, they claimed they needed over 200 GPUs, which we're not talking like NVIDIA GPUs, right? Like for consumers. We're talking GPUs, like Tesla GPUs, are specifically for AI models, and those start at minimum at about $5,000 a pop, right? And then you also need to have servers to actually go ahead and do this. So costing $7 million to $20 million for infrastructure costs alone just to start up is not surprising. And to give you a better example, Google's DeepLink, I believe is what it's called, or DeepMind.
DeepMind. Yeah.
Their cost in 2017 was $400 million for infrastructure alone. So it should give you guys an idea of like, this is not a cheap endeavor at all.
Yeah, and like the investment that Microsoft is pouring into OpenAI, that's not just money. Like they're not just giving OpenAI money; they're literally giving them packages of like the Azure, the Azure servers.
Jesus.
They're giving them servers. They're giving them infrastructures, and it's racking up to $1 billion. Like that's where a lot of their investment is actually going.
Yeah,
and to anyone who doesn't know what Azure is, that's basically Microsoft's cloud infrastructure, like whole websites, company like portals, you name it, are hosted on that. So it's more than just like, an investment of time and resources. It's literally like controlling how the next path of the tech market is going to open. So for Microsoft to get in on this timeline, it's a way for them to open it in a way that they would deem advantageous for themselves.
Exactly, yeah.
Which gets missed in a lot of this. It gets missed in a lot of conversations about tech. Um, so I wanted to get into the timeline of events here at OpenAI, because now with every like new tech endeavor, we fall into this like weird cultural game of, lionizing and making these myths about various figures in tech, right? Whether it's, um, the mythology and hagiography of Bill Gates that me and John were talking about in our Neuralink episode, right? Or even with Steve Jobs. Um, what's really coming to mind right now is like Mark Zuckerberg and like the whole social network drama, right?
Yeah.
So before we get into the timeline, I'm actually not 100% familiar with all of the players at OpenAI, but there is a cast maybe we should introduce to the audience. So let's just start first with Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, and Ilya Sutskever. Do you guys want to give your read on who these characters are?
I have a strong opinion about Sam Altman, but that's because of some social media posts that his sister made.
Okay.
But I think we can get
Yeah.
into that later. I think we should talk about everyone else.
Yes, let's talk Brockman and Sutskever first then.
So Brockman, I believe, was a board member. Brockman, I think, kind of just I don't know. I know he's
so he was the president and a board member of OpenAI. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you there.
No, go ahead. He was. I was just making a point that he was like one of the first to he was one of the first to like resign in protest, right? Or am I getting that mixed up?
No, that's relatively accurate. So basically Greg Brockman, I got the names mixed up for a minute. Greg Brockman, he was the president of OpenAI. Sam Altman is the CEO. And Ilya was also a board member, and I believe was also chief scientist of OpenAI as well. So in the timeline of events, to keep the long story short, Ilya informed Greg and Sam that they were going to be removed from the board due to a board decision, leaving Ilya as the only founding member of OpenAI on the board. Sam Altman was going to be removed from the company entirely, while Greg was going to still keep his position as president. When this information went public, Greg decided to resign as a form of protest, or at least because he didn't feel like he wanted to be in the company anymore after they ousted him from the board. And that's kind of how this whole situation started and began to blow up.
Okay. And then
which is crazy to me. Like you're gonna fire a dude, but then tell him, yeah, you can still work here. You just can't be.
And then I just wanted to get into some of the other supporting cast that's going to come into this too, but into our timeline, right? We've already stated for ad nauseum what we think of Elon Musk. You mentioned Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, was involved in this. Peter Thiel gets talked about on this podcast sometimes, but let's fully, get into why we don't like him. Is because Peter Thiel is really interested in resurrecting a kind of anti-woke tradcath-ish style of politics in the Republican Party, and pours a big amount of campaign funds into recruiting candidates for these kinds of initiatives. And he has a really dystopian view of the future and humanity itself, right? He's also been known to dabble in investing in certain podcasts for politics as well. So for him, I mean, probably right-wing ones for sure, but even allegedly left-wing spaces, he's been giving money to people to muddy the waters and promote reactionary ideas even within the left-wing media space. So for him as a major stakeholder in tech to come back up into this discussion, it cannot be stated that it's his ill-gotten gains in the tech sphere that he's using to create further ills in the political space. I felt the need to communicate that. And we were talking about this earlier too. The the CEO of neoliberalism today, Lawrence Summers, is also going to be making an uncomfortable appearance. So, a lot of demons, a lot of ghouls, folks. It's not October, but it's practically Halloween in here.
Yeah, there's a lot of not great people. I feel like the second Elon Musk comes around, you just end up
You got to play that Dracula theme
worst.
music.
Right. Exactly. You say his
Just-
name and you look outside, there's a lightning bolt. You know what I mean? Like every time.
Jeez. Just to make sure the listeners don't get too confused, Elon Musk was not a part of this story today. Thankfully, this was going to be crazier if he was.
I mean, I feel like
He's in the mix. If he's in
in
the
the
mix,
mix, he's in the midst. But I'm just saying, like, he wasn't. Like, he doesn't have any stake in the company anymore. So that's why I was like, he wasn't a part of the Sam Altman decision.
Yeah. I feel like he's worth mentioning because he is important when it comes to
absolutely,
like the shift of OpenAI.
It was his
moving from like a nonprofit to a for-profit model. What happened right when he
quit,
like tried to take over as CEO and then quit because he couldn't, you know.
Yeah, the reason why I bring that up, right, is that, you know, in the tech space, there's so many people with good intentions and like positive visions for like technology and humanity and stuff, right? But the major players at the table are, you know, the titans of industry in this case, and you know, the money is tainted to some extent. That's really all I wanted to point out. So let's get into it. Let's get into the OpenAI debacle, shall we?
For sure.
All right. So we started with the weird announcement from Ilya that Sam Altman needs to get kicked out on November 16th, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the announcement was very interesting because there was almost no public facing news about this.
Right.
Like because I kind of pay a little bit of attention to OpenAI because, you know, of what they're doing. It's very important, and it does actually affect you know, my job a little. Probably not as much as other people here, but it
affects everything, to be honest.
It does.
So
if you use ChatGPT to cheat on your homework, it affects you. I'm looking at you. Yeah.
Yep. You ain't graduating this year, homie.
Right? No, but I look down and I see, oh, hey, Sam Altman is fired. And I'm like, what? What's going on? So and there's no information about it, you know? And it's interesting that like hindsight is 2020 and we have like, you know, we ended up taking some time making this episode so you can look back and kind of like piece it all together now. But Sam Altman getting fired, at the time there was no news. Now there's like so many different reports as to why Sam Altman apparently has been using OpenAI as like a bargaining chip, or he's using it as like a way to leverage his position to, you know, get more investments, which the board did not approve of. There's reports of Q-Star, which is like another. I don't even know how to begin to explain that without getting too nerdy and too insane with it. But it's
get scare the hose with this one. I want to.
And if it gets too nerdy, we translate.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so Q-Star is essentially you can think of it as like GPT, except it's a lot more logical and it's built exactly for doing math on it's supposed to be like a bigger scale. It's another way of doing math with artificial intelligence. It's like I'll just say it's like GPT but for math. It's not exactly like that, but it's close enough.
So like is it more powerful?
Alpha. Just think Wolfram Alpha, people.
But is it more powerful than Wolfram Alpha, or is it less powerful? Or like what is it in
Here's
comparison?
Here's the thing. It's relatively new. So the idea or the report that came out, I'm not sure if this is like super accurate, but it's just something that has been floating around, was that there was a huge breakthrough with Q-Star. And like Q-Star is supposed to be like this super secret internal project. So there's this huge breakthrough. The idea is that Sam Altman essentially starts throwing away his quote unquote core beliefs, and the beliefs of, you know, one of the core beliefs of OpenAI is that we should be developing AI in a sustainable, safe manner that doesn't, you know, create Terminators. So Q-Star apparently pops off in some of the research. Someone has the idea of maybe we should hold back because they seem kind of powerful, and Sam Altman going, no, fuck you, let's make some money. Let's keep developing. Let's push it out faster. Let's keep going. And that was another one of the reason, allegedly, that he was removed from the board, right? So there's all these different interesting reports coming out about why Sam Altman was fired. None are, I think all of them make sense. There are some that aren't super duper confirmed.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, this is not publicly available information. All we know is Sam Altman is gone.
Yep. Like it was crazy. Basically, like kind of like what John was saying. We got a tweet basically indicating that I think it was from Greg. The tweet was originally written by saying that him and Sam are no longer on the board or no longer at OpenAI. And then the next day, we did a public statement basically saying that Sam Altman was removed from the board because he wasn't. I'm just going to paraphrase here. That due to their investigation, they basically believed that he wasn't being completely transparent with the board, and so he wasn't able to do his responsibilities properly, right? And that's about all the information that really anybody had regarding his firing. The rest was all speculation. John mentioned, for example, Q-Star being a reason. Another one was this one was confirmed. He was confirmed to have used OpenAI's name in an attempt to get funding for other ventures. I don't know for sure those ventures were technically under OpenAI subsidiaries or they were separate companies, but one of them was supposed to be a semiconductor company to develop chips for AI to compete with NVIDIA. So there's a bunch of potential reasons why he was potentially on board.
John, you also mentioned that there were some weird social media posts made by his sister. Is this related to this as well, or
not necessarily related? It's just something. I think last time we talked about Elon Musk in that episode, we mentioned about how these tech CEOs, these tech bros, they use their influence to essentially buy what we call like social capital, which allows for them to kind of manipulate media, allows for them to appear as like these amazing, smart, powerful men who are geniuses in their field, right? And
classic cult of personality shit, basically.
Exactly. And one unfortunate side effect of that is that they can do terrible things and no one really gets to talk about it or think about it, right? I didn't even realize this until me and you and Joe were talking about it in the Discord weeks ago. But apparently, Sam Altman's sister has a ton of allegations towards Sam Altman of like sexual misconduct, of harassment, Jesus. Of just all types of like really disgusting shit. She has, I think Joe shared a list of like someone compiled a group of her social media posts across various different platforms, all saying the same thing, that he was just a really gross pervert with his own sister. And I think that really does tie into the let's have these tech bros like use their social capital to get whatever they want done, because like you'll never see anyone really talk about this. Like she still hangs on. Like I've been looking at them recently. Her name is Annie Altman, by the way, if anyone wants to, look into that. Her name is Annie Altman, and she has just a ton of like stuff across Instagram, across Medium, her own blog. She has stuff about talking about assaults on TikTok, on YouTube. It's really it's very not great. And the problem is that she's openly saying all of this and no one else really cares because Sam Altman is Sam Altman, He's
making too much money for anyone to care about it, unfortunately. Exactly.
Yeah. It's crazy because like she's like in some of these posts she's straight up saying, I am talking about Sam Altman. He did this, and this. And this man is still running around having a bunch of OpenAI employees simp for him. And it's insane that that's a thing.
Exactly. So that's there's a variety of claims being made about his character, but all of them do lean to this like dark streak within him, right? That like, oh, he's not this principled AI developer. He has this like really hostile character to him, and it comes out through the course of events. So not too long after he's fired, suddenly there's a play to get him back.
Yes, and I think
Yeah.
so the interesting thing about his firing was that none of the investors knew either. Like
Yeah. So, like, I'll just say it for my company. I'm not sure if we disclose where I work, so I'm not going to say it. But one of my company I work for is heavily affiliated with OpenAI, one of their largest investors. They were not aware either. So like companies like Microsoft, companies like I still believe LinkedIn was also invested in it, and a couple of others. Nobody was aware of the firing until when they made it public, which was a big issue because a lot of companies actually had talks and investment plans with Sam Altman that same week.
Yeah.
So it caused a gigantic headache. And of course, when money's involved, people don't like their money being messed with. So in short, the big tech giants wanted Sam Altman back, or at least wanted a proper explanation as to why he was removed from the company. Employees of the company also started to quit when Sam Altman and specifically when Greg Brockman also quit. When that happened, you started seeing a bunch of their senior researchers quit. And there were talks about a mass movement of OpenAI employees also simultaneously trying to quit as well. Especially when Microsoft made the announcement. Well, it wasn't a public announcement, but when Microsoft made the open statement that they were willing to hire Sam Altman and Greg Brockman as well as members for OpenAI as well to Microsoft. There was a huge movement there of potentially having members of OpenAI quit and just join Microsoft instead. And that caused a big issue with like a bunch of investors and things of that nature.
And when we say huge movement, we're not talking about like 20% of their workforce.
No, we're talking like 90% of the company.
95% of all of the workers ended up signing. I think it was 700 and 700 and something out of 750
it was huge.
employees. Like
it was like they did a survey. Like 90% of the company basically said that if Microsoft openly was willing to hire Greg Brockman and Sam Altman, they would immediately quit and join Microsoft instead. Which was a huge, like, that number is pretty much unheard of as an FYI for people.
And you got to remember, these are the people who they know what they're doing. These are experts in the AI field. Microsoft is already giving them infrastructure. If they imagine if that went through, imagine if Microsoft didn't have to keep dumping infrastructure and money and time into OpenAI, and they could all just do it all in house. That would be Microsoft would be unstoppable.
Yeah, it would be words.
Well, that's what I understand about it, right? Is that I don't know if Sam Altman was formally ever paid by Microsoft during this like interregnum, right? But the decision wasn't popular among Microsoft employees, from what I understand, especially when there are internal layoffs at Microsoft, in addition to a whole host of other organizational problems, right?
Yeah, so the big reason why Microsoft employees, I'll give my opinions on this one as I can. The biggest reason why a lot of employees were not happy about this rumor, because to be clear, Microsoft did not internally send this to everybody, right? The reason why people were upset was because earlier in the year, Microsoft had over 10,000 layoffs for their software engineering departments. Mm-hmm. And they actually made a public statement around that time saying that this year there would be no salary raises unless you got a promotion. So for most people, your salary was stagnant this year. So the potential announcement and there was a hiring freeze also throughout the year for a lot of different teams. So the idea where Microsoft then said they were going to not only hire more people from OpenAI, but was also potentially willing to give them higher salaries or increase their salaries if needed, was a big deal, which is a huge reason why a lot of people were not happy. And the second reason for that as well is because it was going to create a it potentially would create a fear in certain Microsoft employees about their jobs, because Microsoft already has a bunch of different AI teams within the company. So if they hired everybody from OpenAI, there was a fear that they would no longer be needed. And so there'd be more layoffs and more firings.
And around,
So yeah,
oh,
that was
go ahead. You were saying.
no. I'll just say that was those were like from what I gathered, those were the biggest fears that people had.
And that makes sense, especially given like the current corporate culture, which is, uh first hired, first fired, basically.
It's really interesting that Sam Altman also has a history of being kind of fired from companies. I forget the name of this company, but his mentor um ended up firing him from the past company that he worked at due to pretty much the same ultimately the same reasons. Like Sam Altman getting a little too big for his britches, um uh acting as if he kind of owns the company, all on his own. He has a very, from what his peers would say, or what his past peers have said, he has a very interesting time trying to serve the company as opposed to trying to get funding as like a more self-serving uh way. He's very self-centered is ultimately what the common like judgment here is. He's very self-serving. He will go outside of company limits to enact his plan and his view. And this isn't the first time this has happened.
Yeah, basically, like it seems like it's fair to say that he was trying to become like a major holder of the AI market itself. And he was presenting this, from what peers have said, from what past collaborators and other, folks had to say about him. He is another entry in like the Silicon Valley rich guy stereotype, right? Is he that different from Zuckerberg? Is he that different from Elizabeth Holmes? Is he that different from uh, Peter Thiel, John McAfee, and the rest of these ghouls? I don't know how different, but he seems to be another entry in this category based on everything we've seen so far.
Yeah, but it feels like he's a lot better at kind of like manicuring his image. Like the dude has all this stuff about his sister, has been fired from several jobs before, and still somehow is able to appeal to the minds and hearts of people to get 90% of this company like to quit if he fully walks away.
Which is kind of what like Elizabeth Holmes got away with too, right? Is that she was presenting a fully fraudulent technology to investors, but the myth or the dream that they're able to sell is so powerful and intoxicating that people are willing to look past. And I think with AI in particular, right? I'm not downplaying the potential of the technology, because predictive programming, presents a lot of useful opportunities to reduce labor and give people time back to do more meaningful work. However, I think the upper crust of the corporate world sees this opportunity as a chance for them to reduce their final piece of overhead, which is labor costs, right? So I think there is a big push in terms of how our capitalist society is structured to really keep Sam Altman alive insofar as keeping him in charge of this AI project, because they have a vested stake in seeing AI brought to fruition on these terms.
Which I think is pretty accurate. I remember sharing the article about how several investors wanted Sam Altman back, and I was losing my mind as to like why. Like these people, it really seemed like these people, some of the investors, some of these people, like sure, if they had dealings with Sam Altman, that obviously makes sense. But at the same time, it's not like some of these contracts won't shift over. It's not like it's impossible to get like a new CEO of OpenAI and to get these contracts in. It's really interesting because it feels like a lot of the investors don't specifically want OpenAI to succeed, but they want Sam Altman to succeed because of his vision of OpenAI, which if you don't know, there's kind of two big camps here, right? There's a group that within OpenAI, there is a group that kind of wants this more open, slower, smarter, safer development of, you know, artificial intelligence. And then there's like Sam Altman's group that is way more interested on innovation and faster paced and, you know, break it now and we'll fix it later type of approach. And I think that's the approach that, you know, investors are interested in because it makes them more money. Right.
And
Yeah.
this faster, dangerous approach, we're seeing like the dangers of it, right? You know, there was a report that came out where it's like, I mean, just tying this back to current events, right? The IDF was using AI for like facial recognition of targets in Palestine. And that has led to a whole host of like misfires and civilian casualties in addition to like what is already like a brutal ground war, right? You can see it in like these really savage pushes for like how can we cut down labor costs, you know, and replace people with AI. You can see it with, I mean, at you know, what we're seeing in educational institutions, right, where it's like students are resorting to using AI either as like, you know, like a way to skirt around doing too much homework, or as like, you know, a way to avoid doing it altogether. And educators don't have a response to it meaningfully, you know? So the fast and loose method, you know, whether or not the people following it know the risks or care to know the risks, is the one that's going to be incentivized because it's the one making the most money right now. And investors will always take that mindset.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yeah, the investors love him. The investors are doing whatever they can to keep him alive. So, and that kind of, it's interesting because this kind of brings us into the next point of the saga, which I really want Joe to talk about because I'm very curious. The next part of the saga is kind of Sam Altman's negotiations and his ability to kind of use his social capital along with the people who are backing him, the employees that are backing him. He uses this as leverage to be able to set his grounds on the negotiations of him coming back. So he has like a bunch of rules. He has he's like the board is. He's gonna like handpick the board. He has all this power in the negotiation decisions.
And to catch us up to the present, he's finally been reinstated, right?
Yeah, he was officially announced to be reinstated, I believe, sometime last week.
Okay.
Yeah, so to give just a slight to rewind a little bit, part of the reason, so when Sam Altman was let go, right, from the board and Greg Brockman, the biggest reasons for that was because of the fact that the board claimed that Sam Altman had too much control over the board. Most of the board members were original founding members or were others who were aligned with Sam Altman's views. So basically any decision that he wanted basically to go unturned. Of course, when they tried to do negotiations, there were stipulations in place when Sam Altman wanted to come back. One of which was he wanted to handpick the board members, which of course nobody is going to let that happen. So as a compromise, Sam Altman would be allowed to would be able to meet certain candidates for the board and select a certain number. And in addition, the rest of the board would add or remove more members to make sure that Sam Altman did not have the overwhelming majority. So that way, at least his decisions should be contested. And I believe you guys went into this earlier as to some of the other members that were added. You guys, John, can you repeat some of the members that were added to the board? I think you went into that a little bit earlier.
Let me pull up the article too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Sorry, I'm pulling a hard.
I believe Lawrence Summers was added to the board.
Yeah.
And then there was someone else who was added. I just can't remember off the top of my head.
Let's see. I got the article from Fox Business. Let's see. Sam Altman confirmed on Wednesday he was returning at the helm.
Yeah.
The new initial board will consist of Brett Taylor as chair, Larry Summers, and Adam D'Angelo. Let's pull them up real quick.
Yeah, Larry Summers was the super interesting one.
Yep. And also just to clarify for everyone who's in the podcast right now, who's listening, Even though Sam Altman was brought back as CEO, and I believe Greg Brockman did come back to the company, they aren't members of the board. They just regained their old positions as CEO and president, respectively.
Yeah, they don't have voting rights.
Yep. Oh, also, Microsoft doesn't have a voting position on the board, but they do have an observer on the board.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean it's so crazy because Microsoft never had voting rights.
They never had any representation. Yeah, they own 49% of the company, but they had no representation whatsoever.
So like
which
literally
is why they were pissed.
Like the venture capital. This is just another example of like how venture capital is more powerful than like the board that's currently sitting on the company.
Yeah. To be fair, at least in Silicon Valley, usually the venture capital, at least your largest investors, typically have board spots anyway.
Yeah,
but yeah, I know what you mean. But it's also very weird. It also goes into like OpenAI having one of the weirdest structures of any company I've seen.
Yeah.
It is, and even this board itself, it's like
most of the board has no ownership in the company, which is
but they have major market stake, which is crazy. So Adam D'Angelo, co-founder of and CEO of Quora, Brett Taylor, he was responsible for leading the team that co-created Google Maps, CTO of Facebook, chairman of Twitter Inc.'s board of directors prior to Elon Musk, and is the co-CEO of Salesforce, which holds a major hold in things. And then Larry Summers, we already talked about why we hate him, but again, former president of Harvard, multiple economic advisor positions, oversaw the 2008 recession alleged recovery, right? The CEO of neoliberalism himself, basically.
The man, the myth, the legend, right?
Exactly.
Pretty much. I think one thing about OpenAI that's worth noting is that throughout the years, the company has had so much, I guess, affiliations with large tech companies or government entities has not been funny. Like, if I would just go through a list, I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of all of these companies. Through Elon Musk, they had affiliations indirectly with Tesla and SpaceX. They were affiliated with members of LinkedIn. They were affiliated with members of Google, since a lot of the development team, and even, I believe, Ilya himself was a research engineer at Google. AWS publicly funded them and endorsed them when they first released. Microsoft is investing heavily into them as well. NVIDIA invested very early on in their career. NVIDIA basically gave them supercomputers to train their AI.
Infosys is also an interesting investor because they're a major IT support service.
Yeah, I think they're the second largest one in India, if I remember correctly, which is insane. So, throughout their history as a company, they have had so many affiliations, not including the ones you guys just mentioned, where we had one of the founders or CEOs of Quora. We had as government officials who are there. We had people who were on the board, who basically was president of Harvard at one point, right? They have basically from any industry you can think of, especially that's tech related, they've had somebody in their corner directly affiliated with the company in some way, shape, or form, which I found interesting.
It kind of just goes to show, right, that corporate governance structures are not necessarily interested in maintaining fairness or transparency. They're far more interested in maintaining market control and market interests.
Which is a really interesting point, because remember how I said there's two camps with the slower development and the faster development. One of the interesting things about OpenAI is that a lot of the people there, one of their original dreams, what should I say? Maybe I'll say their mission was to make sure, was to democratize AI. That's the whole point. That's why it's OpenAI. The whole point is to make sure that AI development is democratic, make sure it's open, make sure that we can all do it, right? But now, because of these corporate entities, because of so many people dumping so much money and so much resources into OpenAI, also because of this push for OpenAI to become more of a profit-driven organization as opposed to, a more open, collaborative, software, product. We now have, the closing. It's starting to become more privatized. We're starting to see OpenAI become less and less democratic, and Sam Altman is pretty much the the symptom of that disease. Sam Altman is able to pretty much control OpenAI by handpicking the board. Yeah, they can counteract that by adding people who they think will be against Altman, but Altman gets his position back. It's a non-voting position, but at the same time, he's still able to put people on the board who he knows is going to vote his way. So he still has all this influence. It's still like, the more that Sam Altman makes any chess move on the board, the less democratic OpenAI becomes, which is probably one of the biggest reasons why he was ousted in the first place.
It's also interesting that in his ousting, it was a fellow co-founder that ousted him. Which, in my mind, if you founded a company with somebody and they're willing and they vote you out, that means you again, I'm not making accusations, but that means you probably did something that was a little too far.
Yeah, like it's not like it would be different if there were like a gang war here. You know what I mean? It would be very different if it's like this person always hated Sam and Sam, they always had bad blood, but it's like these are people who have worked closely with him and they're perfectly willing to be like, no, he should not be here.
Yeah.
So yeah, after the negotiations, I believe that the first round of negotiations failed. Right? There were a lot of conflicting reports about the negotiations with him coming back. I believe that the first round of negotiations failed, and then that's when Microsoft announced, "Hey, we'll take Sam if you guys don't." And then Sam comes back, which adds even more leverage to Sam Altman's position in these negotiations, because now not only will people leave, but also Microsoft, who we all know has no problems hiring Sam Altman, they're now threatening to actually do it and pull the trigger. So Sam comes back to the negotiation seat with way more leverage this time, even though he already had plenty before, and gives one more ultimatum of coming back.
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate. And that the fact that Microsoft openly said they are willing to just flat out hire him, Greg, and other members of OpenAI definitely gave him that extra push that he needed. Mainly because of how OpenAI is structured, like internally. It's not a bunch of people who own the company. It's a bunch. The board members are basically a bunch of like ex-CEOs or current CEOs of larger tech companies that would not benefit if all of OpenAI's researchers and effectively, since their models are open, they can just continue from where they left off effectively and just move over to Microsoft, who can then own the entire thing themselves.
Yeah, Microsoft, and again, Microsoft is already, giving them the infrastructure, so it would be nothing. It'd be nothing different.
And Microsoft already has the inherent advantage anyway. They have the largest stake in the company, and this year they pushed pretty much all their major products to have OpenAI integrated. So,
I know they have Bing. What else? Do they have?
So Bing is integrated. I'm trying to make sure what I can say about going public. Okay, so Bing's integrated. They have a lot of the Power Automate and Powers tool suite is either integrated or is being integrated with OpenAI. They have Copilot integrated, or at least they showcased it integrated with.
Oh wow! I completely forgot Copilot is under Microsoft.
Yes. So there's GitHub Copilot, but beyond that, there's also Copilot in Word, and then there's also Copilot in that was announced for what's it called? For PowerPoint. So you can just give a text description and it will basically create the whole PowerPoint slide and graphics for you.
No, mames, that's crazy.
So like these are all things that they have showcased this year at like various AI events. And a lot of it is being powered either by internal systems, but a lot of it's also being powered by OpenAI. So the fact of the matter is, if they were able to own OpenAI and basically have all their researchers inside Microsoft, they could either consolidate all of their AI researching into one team, which would probably be OpenAI's. And on top of that, they would have much smoother and easier integration, because the big problem they have right now is while they own the majority of while they have the largest stake in the company, because they don't directly own OpenAI, they don't have influence over what the company does directly or how much. Let me rephrase. They don't have
quote unquote.
Let me rephrase. Let me rephrase. they don't have direct access to everything OpenAI does. And OpenAI has the ability to basically say no to Microsoft if needed for certain things, which without, what can I say? Without me being able to oust myself and get myself in trouble, that is something that Microsoft has ran into internally on several occasions. So if they got that control as well, it would be, let's just say it would be a gigantic game changer, to say the least.
That's intense. I didn't realize how much, how many Microsoft products ended up having OpenAI integration.
Yep. I think, yeah, it's a lot, even more than what I mentioned. There's some I haven't even mentioned yet that I probably just forgot about. But AI is a huge thing in Microsoft's game plan this year. And they were pushing for that very heavy since GPT became a thing. I think that's part of the reason why they were very upset about the whole thing as well.
Yeah, to say the least, the real winner here is Sam Altman, unfortunately. Like, it looked like he was losing, and now he's basically back up on top as, like,
arguably more powerful now than he was, now that he's able to now that he's already handpicked some very powerful people to vote his way on the board.
Exactly.
It's one of the benefits you get when you are basically like the face of something, right? So like I use this comparison a bit. So we had Steve Jobs, who was basically, when you thought of smartphones, you usually thought Steve Jobs, like the face of Apple. When you think about autonomous vehicles, or at the time, especially AI related vehicles, you usually thought of Elon Musk. When you become the face of like a company that does that, you tend to have a lot of sway, simply because of the fact that your name can bring value to your company.
It's interesting that you bring that concept up, because that's going to bring me into the real scaring the hose question I had for this one, right? Because I couldn't help but shake the idea of like Oppenheimer for whatever reason, like he was the face of the atom bomb, but had like a surprisingly, comparatively minuscule level of control over that project if you compare it to like Sam Altman with AI, right?
Right.
Like, I was trying to, come up with this idea of like, what is the political economy of science in a practical sense, right? Because I find today's Silicon Valley as this like societal equivalent of the Manhattan Project. Not like as a one for one, but if you consider that all the scientific minds are all in one place working on the cutting edge of technology, right? So the atomic science of that age is now replaced with computing technology in this example I'm coming up with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And since, we saw in the film Oppenheimer particularly, right, where science itself was bent to the mercy of more powerful forces, I can't help but see computing technology in a similar boat, where you have the twin interests of the bourgeois state and commerce and capitalism, which seem to taint the science and the development of the technology, but also like they take whatever optimistic or like well-intentioned character that is within like the scientific process completely out of it and subject it to the cruelest forces of market logic, right? And at that point, it subjects the technology itself to be applied in cruel ways, but then it also encourages the most cruel people in the space to take the reins and take power, right? And I can't help but apply that directly to Sam Altman.
No, I think that's pretty spot on. It's interesting because like there's so many quote unquote good actors here, quote unquote, right? There's this idea that like AI should be developed in a way that needs to be a way that needs to be safe. There's some of these researchers at OpenAI even like went as far as to suggesting a government like organization that oversees AIs that are advanced up until a certain point. Like it's interesting because and that's the camp that lost here ultimately. Like that is the camp that lost. Sam Altman's group of and investments, Sam Altman's influence over capital, whether it be economic capital or social capital, like Joe was saying, like that's ultimately what won at the end of the day. And now Microsoft is going to profit. Amazon's going to profit because of AWS. Like, we have all these people that are on the board that have some stake, or at least have some use case for AI becoming super duper intelligent, with and that development happening with as little guardrails as possible. All the while, we see exploits in ChatGPT. We see apps using ChatGPT integration for like therapy or like human resources, and making the worst disgusting mistakes possible. And I do think that comparing the influence of politics and warmongering, that influence over the atomic bomb, is interesting. It's an interesting parallel to the influence of capital and money and economics and market forces over this new emerging technology, because ultimately technology is supposed to be a tool that makes our lives easier. But at the end of the day, once it's subjected to just these market forces, it's never going to be used in that way, right?
Yeah, it's like all three of us went through like the educational process of going through STEM, right? And it's like it's always presented to you, especially when you're young, of like this optimistic, positive space where like you are always on the cutting edge. You could always be the one to find something new, and like you could solve humanity's problems. But then like the minute you're in this practical space where it's happening, it sucks so bad because you're like feeling like literally like what Marx describes as alienation, but like to a more psychologically damaging degree, right? Because it's like all the optimism and hope you had is revealed to be a fantasy, It's all about the Benjamins. It's all about listening to your supervisor. It's all about doing what the quarterly reports predict you to need to do, right? And you just sit there wondering, like, why did I get into this space in the first place, Some people can say the paycheck, but not everyone,
Yeah, that's fair.
For sure.
So I guess I think we've really thoroughly exhausted our notes here, and we've caught everything back up to the present. I know we talked briefly about the implications, and I'm not sure what else we can speculate on. So are there any other angles or any other like implications of Sam Altman's spurious rise, that we haven't considered so far, or that we should consider before we, walk off back into reality scared and afraid?
Oh boy.
I mean, as of now, I think Sam Altman right now is on the board, or he's back as the CEO. Right now we see this stability. Did Joe? I think we might have mentioned this. Sam did essentially get to restructure the board. Who left? Did anyone leave?
How's Ilya doing? Because I'm worried for them now.
Okay, I would have to recheck the list of the board members, but I do believe there were 2 members of the original board at the time of Sam's firing that were removed. I don't think Ilya was one of them.
Wait, Ilya wasn't one of them? Wasn't Ilya? He was the one who like really pushed for have Sam gone, right?
Yeah, hold up. Let me see if I can pull up the new board.
It's really interesting that Ilya somehow made it out.
I think. Let me double check
okay.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, I take that back. Ilya was removed from the board.
Rip.
Yeah. I had to triple check that. In the first report, Ilya wasn't mentioned, but in the more up-to-date one, Ilya was mentioned as being removed from the board. I'm trying to see who else was removed, or was it just Ilya? The only one I could find off the top of my head, just with what shirt, was Ilya. But there might have been another one who was removed as well.
Yeah, Ilya seems to be the only one who was like on that faction that was like, let's be slow about this. Come on.
Yeah, honestly.
For him being removed, that is worrisome.
And I think he was one of the people who advocated for the government oversight of AI.
Well, what makes it even crazier was that Ilya was also on top of being a chief scientist, he was also the one of the people, on top of being a founder, he was at the time, he was one of Google's lead researchers as well. So the fact that he had issues with basically OpenAI moving the way it did,
it's terrifying.
Yeah. Because I think John and I would both heavily agree that software engineers are when we think tech is amazing, we are excited about it and we want it to progress as fast as possible a lot of times. And the fact that as an engineer who worked on this since day one, he wasn't comfortable with this moving at such a fast pace should tell you something.
Yeah, that's
in
a
my
red
opinion.
flag. That's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see. I mean, we'll see the future of OpenAI. We know the future is going to be profitable.
Yeah. Unless something goes horribly wrong, OpenAI will make money.
Yeah, they're going to be rolling in cash for a minute,
and considering Microsoft gave them $10 billion this year, they will be fine for a minute.
So, I guess a question that's coming up now, right, is that the open source model still kind of stands as like one of the few bulwarks in the tech space for ethics, right? I'm kind of wondering, like, what, if not remedies, like what institutions or what spaces could like resist this push in the market, right? Because I'm not convinced the United States Congress is going to do anything about this.
Oh, dude! Oh,
I'm just going to be honest. They don't even know what's going on, and then the ones that are below 50 have all been like paid off. Like you would have to be like a real crank who understands what tech companies are getting up to, or you would have to be some kind of like, I don't care, Silicon Valley's not getting $1 from me. You'd have to be a real crank to resist them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just trying to think, right? Because it's like the open source framework was somewhat adopted by OpenAI at the start, right? But it didn't stop someone from Sam Altman, turning to the dark side. So
so to be clear,
go ahead.
To be clear, just because you're open source, it doesn't mean that you won't be for profit, right?
Right.
All open source really, in simplification, what open source basically means is that your code itself is open, which means that it can be adopted or researched or modified by other people. And it's completely open to everybody. So there's nothing being hidden. It's not proprietary. That's the idea behind it. But just because something's not proprietary doesn't mean that you can't profit off it. And a example of this actually is OBS. I'm pretty sure as streamers, we've all used OBS.
Open broadcasting software, yeah.
Yep. OBS itself is open source. Streamlabs OBS is not, but it basically just takes OBS and puts a nice spin on it. And that's an example of a way that people have taken something that's open source and have made a bunch of money off it.
Right.
Well,
so
I think
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. In OBS's case, Streamlabs does actually make a decent amount of money, but a lot of even then with that example, a lot of the funds that OBS gets is from Patreon. Literally, is from Patreon or for like their open collective platform. Which
OBS itself, absolutely. But I was I was giving an example of like open source and how you can technically still make profit of it.
You can make money off of you definitely can make money off of open source. I think it's a lot harder and you have to do it more ethically. Like adding features to stream, I think that's a fine thing, right? I think the problem when it comes to AI and LLMs and these, and GPT is that while the models themselves you can download and play with,
data isn't.
Exactly. It's the training data. I think that's the scary part. The fact that we don't know where this data is coming from. And even though you can technically, run GPT on whatever hardware you want, you can download and run on your hardware. It'll never be as good as ChatGPT because they have spent billions and billions of dollars of resources training this data. That's essentially what you're paying for. That's essentially where they're getting their money from. And that's hilariously why they're getting sued and dodging lawsuits left and right, because in that data is copyrighted works, and that data is sometimes private information that should not be there,
Yeah, it's a oof. We can go into this all day, but
I mean, it's worth getting into a little bit at least. Yeah.
yeah. So to talk about GPT and how it was raised, we'll talk about ChatGPT. That's the one people can interact with the most.
Yeah.
So the way ChatGPT worked when it first came out was that it was trained on any data that was publicly available on the internet prior to 2021. So up until 2021, if you had something that was on Reddit, Google, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, any website that in theory you can scrape and get access to, OpenAI used that as training data. The problem, like John was referring to, is that not everything that is publicly accessible is necessarily okay for you to use or should even be on there, like copyrighted books or copyrighted text that shouldn't be public to people, right? And that was part of the reason of OpenAI's lawsuit, because they're using some of that data as training data, and some of that data might be outputted to users as well. More modern versions of GPT, or of ChatGPT, I should say, do use, I believe, people's like inputs as part of the training data.
Yeah.
But the original ChatGPT, when it first came out, only used data that was up until 2021. That was on the internet.
So I feel like this really is that example of, or at least I feel like some of the issues that GPT. I'm wondering how much of the issues that ChatGPT is running to now is directly a result of Sam Altman's like hurried approach to developing AI. What do you think about that? Like how much of this do you think?
I think it's 100% the case, right? Because like the thing that I'm running into as I think about all this, right, is that open source may democratize code to an extent, but like how do you get it back to the point where because the money making instrument itself is ChatGPT, right? It is the large learning models, right? It's one thing to democratize them, but how do you give those back to the employees? How do you give those back to the people who worked on it? Because Sam Altman holds the entire thing in the palm of his hands, basically. And through his cult of personality, holds his workers' loyalty, right? But how do you give it back to all the people who put their like blood, sweat, and tears into it? And if you did such a thing, you know, if the employees controlled it and how it was used, do the ethical implications then change? Do they then have an ability to consider more, with more consideration, you know, the ethical considerations, how quickly they move on it, how long they take to fix like a loophole before it gets like pushed out? That's my only idea, right? And that slow, measured approach was the one way. But it's like, I don't know, because what I'm trying to think of is like ethics itself is like all we have in a liberal framework with a lot of fields, right? Is like people have to remember ethics and then they have to basically remember to apply them in their day to day. But in a practical sense, you know, ethics in the business space is a joke. Ethics in the scientific space is like a footnote, you know, like if your supervisor tells you not to do it, you're going to listen to your supervisor to keep your job. So like, you know, ethics and like mission statements are all we have in a liberal framework. How do we move past it to where the people who work on it have control over these decisions rather than an enterprising CEO will drive the entire vision of the project in a manner that gives him the most control and makes him the most money? Because that's where we're at. That is really where we're at.
I mean, honestly, I don't. It's going to sound very pessimistic, but I think it's too late. I don't think there's, because ultimately
under this system, I don't know.
There's not a good solution to it, in my opinion.
Because the thing is that like I hate to be like that guy, but like people in the tech industry have been harping for years and years and years about data privacy and as simple shit as like cookies and being mindful of the data that you share with companies. And no one gives a fuck. Honestly, no one cares. Every single time you see a web page that has something to do with cookies, you click accept all, and then you continue your way. Every single time you sign up for a new social media thing, you skip. Nobody reads that long ass contract.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Because it's like consumer protection.
That's the data. Yeah, and like that's what we need. We need companies that give a fuck about, not about profit, because honestly, profit is the reason why they sell our data, right?
Right.
We need a non-profit driven way of managing data and making, because that's ultimately the problem. OpenAI having this crazy like corner on the market, it's not because of their software, it's because of the data, and it's the data that they're openly like they're working with. They're working with PayPal, they're working with Microsoft, they're working with Amazon, they're working with all of these companies that have a shit ton of our data, and it's what can we do about that? There's nothing we really can do except for having a non-profit motive driven approach to handling data and doing it in a safer and more responsible manner.
Yeah, because at our current level, all we have is like corporate ethics, which we all know is a joke, and then we have consumer protection, which, even if effective at like in the aftermath, ends up always being an afterthought.
Yeah.
Whether it's cars, whether it's tech, whether it's consumer goods,
I think this is more of a problem. Well, I won't say more of a problem, but I think there's two big pieces to this problem. One of which is a industry problem in general, just within the tech industry. And the other is a consumer problem. So here's what I mean by that, right? The tech industry as a whole always focuses primarily on innovation. That's just the entire point of the industry. And it's to a fault in our case, to where, and I'm pretty sure John can agree with this, where we oftentimes will push for speed of progress at the sacrifice of both at times of both safety and as well as even for workers at the time at the cost of their time and sanity as well, right? And in regards to data privacy specifically, I feel like that's more on a consumer standpoint, right? Because here's the problem: to be realistically speaking, the data that companies have on us is data that we give them access to at some point, whether it's through whether it's through an agreement, or whether or not we literally registered using that information, right? It's all data that we at one point gave them. And culturally, as one problem on a consumer standpoint, is that we tend to forego privacy for the sake of convenience.
100%.
Like we get, let's be real. How much information have we given to Google at some point in our lives? Even right now, we're using Google Drive, and we have Google accounts, which has a bunch of our data. YouTube gathers data as a living. We watch YouTube videos and have Twitch ads. Again, more ways for us to collect data. And even for other things that we have as well. The fact is, while people say we care about privacy, we care about privacy when it's inconvenient. But when but we will give up pieces of our privacy if it provides us enough convenience. I think that's just a cultural thing in our society that led to the situation we're in right now too.
I mean, it's the big problem with consumerism itself, but yeah.
I'm not convinced that it's more of a cultural issue, though. That's my thing. Like, I think your analysis is 100% correct. I'm not going to disagree with that at all. But I'm very hesitant on blaming the consumer, even if it is technically the consumer's fault, right? Like you're like no, I'm being so serious. Like we've all clicked the I don't care, take my data button. We've all done it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But
100%.
I think the bigger problem here. I think the bigger problem here is the fact that is transparency. Like do you really expect like my grandma to know what she's clicking on when she's making a Facebook account? Like no, there's no way,
absolutely not,
right? Like it's borderline predatory, and it has to be, because if we fully knew exactly, like me, the people in this group, we've all been in the tech space. We all know, right? We all understand what's happening. But people who have no idea what's going on, like I remember Like I remember sitting down and having to explain to my wife what a cookie was. You know what I mean? Like it's really is like that. And I think that the bigger issue is like it's easy to sit there and blame the consumer and go, "LOL, you fucked up. Like this is your fault." But at the same time, it's like, how are they supposed to really know if they're not being 100% transparent?
That's exactly what I was trying to get at, right? Which is the bind of consumerism. It's, not to be a Marxist about it, but I think it's a dialectical relationship. And what I'm trying to say really more broadly is that the problem with consumerism is that you have no choice. You have to participate in the consumer relationship, which
Yeah,
means you don't own the product, you don't own how you get it. It's the company distributing it to you on their terms. You got to sign all the papers, hope to God they had your interest in mind. And then they sell you on the dream, which is convenience, with so many products actually. And then you find out a whole host of shit. Oh my God, there was lead in this. Oh my God, they're exploiting who to get what? Like you sign up for so much shit. But that's the problem with being a consumer, is that your way to go get the product yourself has been circumscribed without your permission well before you were born. And tech is a big example of that, where the world's moving forward, technology is evolving with or without your consent. It's happening. The corporate logic dictates that it must happen, and it will. And to an extent, having a technologized society is a net good, right? Like it does make things better in a macro level sense, right? But that's what I'm trying to get at, is that like, if you're not in a position where you have a say in the matter, you're always going to be at the mercy of it. And like offsourcing it to like individual consumer responsibility is all we have under this system. It's like, well, you should have stayed smart and got a VPN. And even then, we're finding out VPNs are also fraudulent to some extent, right?
Yeah, there's been quite a few VPNs that have, let's just say, you're not as safe as what you thought with your data with VPNs.
And that's really what I'm getting at, right? Is that's the whole problem with consumerism as a whole. But to Joe's point, it still is cultural, because consumerism is the backdrop of our society, right? So it influences culture as a result. It influences social reality as a result. So it's hard not to take all that into consideration when we think about all of this. And that's why, people may dismiss this episode as scaring the hose content or a bunch of dorks rambling, but these are the real implications at stake. And that's why this is worth paying attention to.
No, I think I see the point. I think that because even I think I was just thinking about this, but even with VPNs, it's like you don't trust one company to access your data, so instead you're going to trust a different company. That's literally that's our best mode of defense here. And we're starting.
Yeah, you can't trust yourself to do it. You don't have the means to protect your data privacy, but someone says they can, and you got to go off of their word, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think like another thing too is like, even if it was theoretically possible for you to, I guess, protect all your data, like you made your own custom VPN, you somehow found
so you
like
gotta know how to code. You got to know how to do.
But that's my
all
point.
These things.
You need the only way to actually keep your data completely privatized is either A, don't share it all in the first place, or B, which is in this society not feasible, or B, you're going to have to somehow be that one dude who wants to DIY everything in your life, which let me tell you, that is not feasible and will still not work.
Yeah,
it's not. And that's the thing, is like convenience is an easy thing to sell, because in a lot of cases, people are either like boxed out of the knowledge on how to do it, or boxed out of the availability to do it. Like services like HelloFresh take advantage of how little time people have. As a non-tech example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Order these pre-cut veggies that's gonna boost carbon emissions because you have 30 minutes in a day to go prepare a meal for yourself.
Oh, and also we're gonna do union busting, literally.
Yes, and there may or may not have been labor trafficking and
I forgot about that for HelloFresh.
so
Yeah,
much
man.
nonsense, so much nonsense.
So I
It's
guess
But
go ahead.
I guess one of my final notes is more of a question. Mostly honestly directed at Joe, really.
Okay.
In terms of the future of AI, we already touched on it will be profitable just because the shareholders and the interested parties involved, it will be, but they will make money no matter what.
Yeah.
I guess outside of that, where can you see the future of AI? We can talk. Okay, two-part question. Where can you see the future of OpenAI, specifically with their non-profit parent company, as
Okay.
well as their subsidiary, and then also AI in general as the technology? Where do you see AI in the next 5 years?
All right. So for OpenAI, that's a oof. Okay. Yeah. I'll try my best to answer this one. So with OpenAI, I think the best move they have ahead of them right now, they already have like a very good language model. They have popularity on their side, it's being used by everybody. I think right now the best thing they could do from like a improvement standpoint or a business standpoint is to make OpenAI easier to integrate. Right. And by that I mean not just integrate with other products, but I could foresee OpenAI. I'm not sure if you ever heard of like Open API.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, but basically using that very similar concept so that OpenAI can basically just query or basically inquire to any service or any application they need to further enhance their data set. And they've already shown this, for example, with Wolfram Alpha, right? If they can't solve a math problem, they would basically just call Wolfram Alpha, which is far superior at it, to do the calculations for them. And I feel like having that route open to them and then expanding that would basically be a game changer for GPT at least specifically. And I see like the next 5 years, Open AI or at least GPT probably being integrated pretty heavily into either. Well, I'll give you some industries. It'll be integrated heavily, I believe, into um as a replacement for most chatbots that exist right now. So that could be customer service bots, that could be troubleshooting bots, whatever. I feel like that would be a very big thing that will start to replace.
Which I'm very
Um,
hesitant about because I've gotten
yeah,
some very wrong information from ChatGPT in terms of that. But I'm sorry, keep going.
yeah, yep. I'm very aware. I also think that for companies, it will be used internally as a first line defense for on calls.
Interesting. Okay.
So the idea will be, based on what OpenAI said that they wanted, the idea would be you can make your own custom GPT, or your which basically you give it whatever data you want to train on. That could be like your internal development dots, for example, right? And then GPT will use that to troubleshoot or answer questions to other people or for on-call rotations, and that way it will make troubleshooting and dealing with things more automated and a lot less stressful, right? So I feel like doing stuff like that will probably be the best move they can do in the short future, just because it'll have a huge corporate impact. For AI as a whole, this is a very broad question. I'll break it down in different parts. In terms of language-based models, I still think it's permissions will be open AI, probably monopolizing the whole thing, because I don't
Oof.
think, I'm just going
Big
to be
oof.
real, I don't think Bard is there yet. I don't think it will be either in the next 5 years. They have a lot of catching up to do. I see not maybe if it's not GPT itself, I see a company or software like GPT being integrated into every smartphone. Like for example, if you told me that there is a GPT powered Siri, I would not be surprised.
Oh, I would not be surprised either. Yeah.
In the next 5 years. We've all heard, I think all of us at some point have heard AI created music at some point, or AI voice music, right?
Yeah.
I think in the next 5 years, AI will get to a point where, or I'll say 5 to 10. In that's 5 to 10 years, AI will get to a point where even if it won't be used to create music from scratch, AI will start to be able to ease the jobs of sound engineers and video editors, specifically for content creation.
And that's one of the uses for AI that I think is defensible, right? Where it's like if you're using it to eliminate repetitive labor or like do like, you know, really eliminate tedious tasks. Like there was that big news article about the Beatles unreleased track being released because they finally were able to use AI to like scrub noise from the track or whatever the case is. That's a pretty defensible use, but it's like, have you all seen this like YouTube ad that's been going around? It's like AI Steve Harvey telling you to sign up for an MLM.
I had even better. I had AI Andrew Tate.
Oh no, man.
The only thing worse than Andrew Tate is AI Andrew Tate.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He called me broke in 8 different languages.
I don't know. I'm nervous about AI in the music industry. I feel like I'm the only one, but I am. First of all, there was that one AI rapper that repeatedly was dropping the N-word, and I don't know how I feel about that. That is such a weird thing that I did not think I'd have to process. But I'm not sure how I feel
say
about
the N-word.
Can an AI say the N-word? And second of all,
is one of the devs black?
It's one of the devs black. Hell nah. And then I think again an issue that I think is really pressing is like we think tech is bad, right? We think tech, and it is, right, in terms of like profit hungriness. But like the music industry,
it's hell
like
worse.
It's if AI, I mean AI has already touched the music industry, but
you got AI up against Hollywood sickos.
Literally though, you're gonna have AI working with like record label companies. You know, I don't like if a sound engineer literally starts using it, he's gonna get fired because then they're just gonna find a record label will just start doing exactly what like other industries are doing with AI, and they're just gonna start using it to, you know, cut down on their labor costs. And
we are literally speed running iRobot starring Will Smith.
So but that movie was cool though. So
it was cool. I ain't gonna hold you. It was cool.
If I get a robot arm, fuck it. OpenAI take over the world. You know.
Hell no.
We're speed running Detroit Become Human.
Low key, honestly, I'm here for it. I ain't gonna lie to you.
Let the robots have a revolution, bro. That's whatever.
Look, I want to see a robot have an MLK march. That's all I need to see. That's all I need to see.
I can't believe a video game was like, what if robots were black people?
Literally,
it was literally what if robots were black people and the Detroit riots never happened. That's basically what Detroit Become Human was.
What a great game! I need to play the game again.
I will play it again.
I didn't like it, but at the same time, I understand because we have to resort to such convoluted ways for white gamers to understand racism is bad.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
You're not, but it's so funny.
It's just for me. I'm like, damn, you needed this to learn it was bad. Okay, fine, I guess. I don't make video games. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh no, what do we do? There's oppressed Android people.
Right.
Oh my god.
Totally no metaphor here.
Oh my god, they are working for abusive people and not getting paid. They are being abused and tossed out. Oh my god. They decided they wanted rights and freedoms. Are they really sentient people?
Hey, I'm gonna get canceled for this, but if they had the robots singing spirituals, I would have thrown the game away.
Wait, hold up.
They did.
I don't remember this.
They did.
They did. Not saying spirituals in Marcus's ending.
They did. I got the ending. I got the ending.
They say spirituals.
I got the one, and one of the endings. You either Marcus. You either spoilers to all our listeners.
Spoiler.
Oh, fuck this game. We're spoiling it. Fuck it.
But one of the endings for Marcus, like the cops are all aiming their guns at you, and your hands are up, and you can rush or you can. I forgot what the other option is. But like the other option, you sit there and you chant and you start singing.
Yes,
like,
hold on. You start singing, hold on.
Yeah, man, they literally got robots singing Negro spirituals, bro. That's
not a joke.
Crazy.
That's not a joke. That's the ending I got. It was beautiful.
They kind of popped off, not gonna lie, you know?
Look, all I'm saying is that they did a very good job at telling what Black lives are like if you just remove Black people and made them androids.
Literally.
Which is fucked up because you're basically saying they exist to perform labor. That's super fucked.
Well, let me tell you about this thing called the transatlantic slit on plan.
Hey, brother, hold up. Don't forget.
Brother, keep that spirit for February. We got
you're right.
content
Yeah,
for February.
You're right. Don't forget, John. In the game, they also had to go up to the north to become free.
That's true. Oh my god! Oh my god!
It's Canada. They were trying to cross into Canada, dog.
Yo, they literally. Oh my god! Oh my god! Yo, I wish they put a part in there about following the Big Dipper. That would have been so good.
If there was a robot Harriet, there was a robot Harriet Tubman in the game.
There was a robot Harriet Tubman.
Wait, so who was the John Brown? Who was the John Brown in this one who was like trying to free robots before this?
I don't think there was a white dude trying to free.
Yes, there was. Marx's master.
Oh my god!
Yo, I'm replaying this game.
I'm replaying this game.
In February, I'm replaying this game.
There's so many other games. We could be playing like the DLC for Assassin's Creed Black Flag Freedom Cry. We could be doing that.
Nah, bro. Nah.
I still got that queued up on my Switch, so I might do that for February.
Yeah. I haven't touched Assassin's Creed in such a long time. I'm sorry, we're getting way off topic.
Sorry, we're way off topic.
To be fair, I think we've really hit the end of our discussion here. Like,
yeah,
we did.
The only last thing I wanted to note is that my not great. I hope it's not true, but my last prediction for OpenAI in terms of because they have a non-profit. I forget. I don't know how the order works. I think the non-profit is the parent company and the subsidiary is the for-profit.
Something like that. Yeah.
I think that eventually the non-profit is going to get deleted, and they're just going to be a for-profit entity. That's my genuine. I hope it's not true, but I could 100% see that in the coming future.
You're telling me that on top of all this, they were able to avoid paying taxes?
Literally, yep.
Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna close this with the Looney Tunes theme. That's
all, folks.
Boom.
Nah, you're crazy with that one.
But yeah, no, that's my prediction. That's it. That's my last remark.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Final remark for me, not regarding to OpenAI, but just where I think AI will be in the future. My last thing is what I at least hope for. I want to see advances for AI in the medical field. Specifically, I want to see advances in medical research, and I want to see advancements specifically when it comes to assisted AI tooling for surgeries. Those are two things I want to see progress further in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's interesting.
I personally think we are days away from living in the Gundam timeline.
Hell no.
We already got fusion technology allegedly. We got developments in AI and robotics. Next thing you know, they're gonna send motherfuckers to live on the moon. And before you know it, we will be fighting each other in giant robots.
I'm so ready.
Actually, hold on. If I get my own Gundam, I'm down for this.
And guess what? You know what that means? Motherfuckers gonna have gay autism.
Motherfucker.
Some weird psychic powers, my boy.
We gonna have weird.
Autism. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Hell no, we not need people with superpowers around here. No, thank you.
Don't.
In conclusion, we should never have let sand think.
Agreed. Take the lightning out of the rock. It doesn't need to think anymore.
We should radically change course to live in the Dune timeline where they destroyed all the computers and instead got a certain class of guys really high to do all the thinking.
That's the way to do it. You know, any other way is objectively wrong.
Y'all wild, and I'm out going to Doom timeline. That's a
Doom timeline also gets crazy. That's the timeline where you got Irish Muslims. You got Irish Muslims, bro.
Oh God, that's a thing.
But you get cool shields, so you're bulletproof. That's worth it. It's worth it. It's always worth it.
In hell.
I don't care. I want to be able to block bullets. Okay, either give me the Matrix or give me Dune. Okay, one of them.
You know what? Listen, if you want to be able to block bullets, we'll give you some super soldier serum. Let you block a couple.
That's just called. I don't want to die. You know, I don't want them to hit me.
I hang around with people who don't have guns on them. That's how I avoid bullets.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
He said, "Fuck the gun shield. I want gun control."
Gun.
I might need to learn from you two. I'm still around too many.
Fair.
Well, dear listeners, thank you again for tuning into this one. Joe, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your input and insight. And shout out once again to John for setting this up and getting this together. I think this was a very necessary discussion to have on the show. Joe, would you like to plug your Twitch channel?
Yeah, sure. So y'all can follow me on Twitch, AfroJoeTTV. Usually I just play games sometimes with this full John over here. But yeah, come check me out. Usually stream every few days. And I'll be starting back up in January. So yeah.
Hell yeah. I will have the links to your Twitch as well as John's Twitch in the show notes and description, as well as all the links to follow this podcast on the internet. With all that being said, once again, thanks for tuning in, dear listener. Stay safe. Have a good one. Bye-bye.